Welcome to the Liberated Leader podcast. I'm your hostess, B. Chan. Together, we'll connect with leaders in the psychedelic space and explore the creations they birthed into this world, all in hopes to bring the psychedelic renaissance into the 21st century and spread the message of inner healing. Because when we heal ourselves, we heal the world. So, let's get liberated. Welcome back to another segment of the tripping tips. Okay, so again, I'm going to highlight, I'm not giving advice. I'm just sharing from my own personal experience. And so your mileage may vary. Take what you want from it, discard the rest. And if you need professional help, please go and get it and take care of yourself. Okay. Another thing is I'm just going to touch on certain topics here and there and share with you what I know. I, of course, can't go into deep detail into all of them just because like one tiny topic, you can expand it into like weeks or even years of content and topics. So this is just a soundbite, and I highly encourage you to do your own research, do your own investigation. Okay. So tripping tips. Again, when you go on a psychedelic trip, you will enter 3 stages. First is prepare, second is journey, and third is integrate. So I want to talk a bit about intentions, setting intentions on your psychedelic trip. So I would say that there is a major difference between intention and expectations. They are not the same thing. So typically when you're setting intentions, you can definitely talk to whoever is facilitating your ceremony about that. But I've talked to so many people that actually do this, and I found kind of 2 schools of thought. One is not setting any intentions, and therefore there are no expectations. And then you just kind of go with the flow. Whatever happens, happens, and you accept it and you surrender to that experience. You surrender to that process. On the other hand, setting the expectations is something that can be also very powerful in the fact that it's very intentional, right? It's very ritualistic. It's very ceremonial. You have that kind of tribal effect or that tribal feeling to it, right? Like everything has a place and a rhythm to it. But I will also say that, talking to these people who have been teaching me how to set intentions, they say you may set it, but that may not be something that you get in the end. For example, specifically with ayahuasca, it's like Mother Aya will show you what she wants to show you. You can't direct your experience with her. Like it's really hard to do that, right? And so I would still say, sure, set it, right? Like really think clearly about, I think in a really broad sense of, well, what are your intentions? Why do you want to do it? Are you trying to dive into something very specific? Maybe is one particular childhood trauma that you want to, uncover and finally let go of, or dive into deeper, work through and let go of? Or is it more so for a recreational type of a thing, right? And at the very beginning, because I didn't know how to set intentions, most of my intention settings was, I'm just curious. I just want to explore. I just want to experiment. I just want to have fun type of a thing. Definitely not in a club setting, of course. So here's a quick story for you. I had a member of my community who I was just kind of chit-chatting with, and she just came away from one of her ceremonies, and she expressed to me that she really wanted that spiritual experience that everybody else was talking about, that transcendence type of a ceremony, and she didn't get it. And so she was super disappointed, and she really wants that. And brings me back to my own learnings of that. And I, for a period of time, I definitely was concerned about if I was just being a trip chaser, right? There's actually a term for that. You're just chasing that next trip because you want to get that thing, or you want to get that thing, but you didn't get it, or you got it and you want to keep experiencing that, right? But, time and time again, I'm being reminded by real life examples that the more I want it, the more it's going to evade me. And when I finally let go of that control is when it really flows. So think about like a garden hose and water is going through it. What you're doing right now is you're kind of like, you're holding onto it so tight that you're cutting off that supply. And so the water is just like building up to where you're holding onto. But once you let go, the water, or like the energy, or like, whatever you want to label that as, that's really when it starts to flow and starts to come to you, away from you, in exchange, and all that type of stuff. And same thing for like when you're manifesting, right? Like you're putting it out there in the world and you're going to see what it brings back to you. without expectation. There's the intention that you're putting out without expectation. And sometimes I think people get really confused between the two. So that is my tip for preparation in terms of intention, the difference, just being aware of the difference of intention versus expectation. When I went to my IS ceremony, I had a really good friend who told me that there was one particular intention that she was told to say or think of or, bring about. And she actually wrote it down for me. I think what might be really fun later on is actually, I like to take notes or leave myself voice notes or something like that while I'm tripping. So I might actually just go back to some of them and read it out to you guys. So this is something that was introduced to me by a friend. I think I used the same one for my first IS ceremony as well. So again, your mileage may vary, take what you want, discard the rest. So in our IS ceremony, she said, think of one thing you want to let go and think of what you intentionally want to bring into your life. Show me, and basically say this, like, show me who I've become, not how I see myself or others do, but who I am, because the truth will set me free. 2, merge me back with my soul at all costs. And this includes, digging up traumatic events in childhood. And 3, heal my heart. So again, think of one thing you want to let go. Think of what you intentionally want to bring into your life. And then 3, I guess, are these sub-bullet points of show me who I've become, not how I see myself or others too, but who I really am. 2, merge me back with my soul at all costs. And 3, heal my heart. I thought that was quite strong, quite beautiful. So one tip while journeying is, I kind of mentioned this before, but really just surrendering to the process and being open to what happens. Your intention is your intention. Your intention does not always equate to reality or expectations, right? So for example, during my Aya ceremony in Mexico, I had a shamanic death, like literally like the first 10 minutes of when it kicked in my mind's eye. I was lying down on the ground. I could not move my body for the life of me. I did not have control over my body or my limbs. And I was getting eaten alive by insects, like think tarantulas, cockroaches, like ants. And they were just like eating my body and I couldn't move. And the only thing I could do is not to resist and to let it happen. And so I thought, okay, fine. I'm just gonna let it happen. And by the way, I am deathly scared of insects. After that experience, not so much anymore. Now I can actually kill them. But I was freaking out for sure a lot. But knowing how to downregulate myself, knowing how to de-stress myself in stressful situations, I think that really helped. So that kind of, getting to know yourself and having these tools in your tool belt is definitely something that everybody should learn how to do. And so after that first 10 minutes of this happening and me struggling, and then me finally deciding, you know what, like, fine. If your soul's purpose is to eat me alive and kill me, and there's nothing I can do about it, okay, fine, do it. And once I surrendered to that, I literally shot up to the moon, and it was blissful for the remaining hours of my ceremony afterwards. So again, surrender to the process and be open to what happens. Okay, one tip on integrating. This isn't necessarily for intentions, but I find this really helpful, which is joining sharing circles or integration circles. And so there's a few resources that I'll point you to. One is called Silo Health, and they are an organization out there that does a bunch of different things and offer resources and whatnot. They also have, I think it's every week or every other week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, they have free virtual integration circles. And both David and Sarai are really good hosts and hostesses for that, or guides for that. Another one is Thank You Plant Medicine. I mentioned them before, and they basically have circles going kind of every single day of the week in the evenings. So definitely jump on their website and see which one works for you and join those ones. And also your local psychedelic society. So here we have Vancouver Psychedelic Society. UK has like the biggest one in the world. And basically each major city has their own society. It's like a nonprofit or like a really grassroots group of people who are pro psychedelic, and we get together and just talk about things that are happening in our industry. And so most of the time, I would say that they also have some sort of sharing circle, if not integration circle. So join it, is usually free, and just check out what they have to offer, what kind of resources they have to offer you. And I have to say that these sharing circles, I do see new ones popping up every day with a unique focus. So there could be BIPOC, so Black, Indigenous, people of color ones. There could be LGBTQ plus ones or women only ones. Here in Vancouver, the Flying Sage, run by Michael Oliver, he has in-person circles that happens every other Tuesday. And I hear from the grapevine that there will be a BIPOC female one happening very soon too, that I'm very interested and very excited to be joining. And last but not least, if you are in a pickle and you just need somebody to debrief with and have that kind of, sounding board and that type of a support in the middle or right after your trip, there is something called Fireside Project. They are a psychedelic peer support line. I'll definitely link all this in the show notes so you don't have to try to remember this. You can basically call or text their support line. It's 62 Fireside. And I think they're based in the US. I think they're only accepting calls from the US. You might want to check that out. And they're opened every day from 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm pretty sure they're based in SF. So just reading off of their website here, Fireside Project Psychedelic Peer Support Line offers free confidential peer coaching by phone or text message to people in the midst of psychedelic experiences, people holding space for others who are in the midst of psychedelic experiences, and people integrating past psychedelic experiences. There we go. We do not provide medical care, medical assessment, or psychotherapy. People who think they may be having a medical emergency should call 911. And they are staffed by compassionate, supportive volunteers. It's basically all volunteer run from diverse backgrounds who are trained to listen deeply and from a place of non-judgment. All volunteers have completed our rigorous training program, which includes components such as active listening, providing support during psychedelic experiences, integrating and providing support by text message. Cool. This to me really reminds me of any crisis line. And I used to volunteer at one over 10 years ago. So I kind of get the gist of what they're trying to do. And yeah, it's very helpful for people who are in a pickle, who doesn't have that kind of pure group to confide in. And so I definitely recommend that you guys go and check out Fireside Project. And that's our tripping tip of the week. The Liberated Leader podcast is brought to you by Akita, a kick in the ass agency. We specialize in helping female psychedelic coaches who want to impact a global community by evolving their heart-based business to reach more people and fucking change the world. We are the first growth consultancy that provides website, branding, and evergreen funnel solutions at the intersection of marketing, technology, and design. As a complimentary gift to our listeners who are interested in the healing potential of psychedelics, we personally curate an ever-growing list of psychedelic coaches, guides, therapists, and clinics in North America that meet our standards of operation for you to have a safe, guided, intentional journey with. Just click on the link in the show notes and enter your email to get access. Cool. Well, welcome back, everyone. Today we have an honored guest on the show. We have Kristof Lenart. He is the founder of the Vancouver Psychedelic Society, which is a rapidly growing community of over 1,400 members with bi-monthly gatherings featuring guest speakers and discussions on topics related to psychedelics. He is inspired by the promising therapeutic implication psychedelics may offer those suffering from mental health conditions and problematic substance use. Kristof has a background working as a registered nurse in the ER and is currently doing professional photography and in the process of completing his master's in counseling psychology to become a psychotherapist. Welcome to the show, Kristof.
Awesome. Thanks for having me over here. It's just a pleasure to be here with you.
Yes, of course. Jumping right into it, can you tell us a bit more about yourself and how you got the society started?
Yeah, I know for sure. So a lot of this started actually with my experience with psychedelics. So actually, there's a little bit of a funny story to this because my first psychedelic trip was out of high school, and I actually had a very negative experience. And I actually vowed to never do psychedelics again. So it's kind of interesting turnaround that happened that actually drew me into all this. And it was a trip with my brother that really went south after that. He ended up sort of a whole bunch of things happened. He unloaded on me that he was feeling these feelings of superiority over me and all this kind of stuff. I was having a bad trip. My mom was calling me. I didn't know what was going on. It was just like a total downhill.
Wow.
All right. So terrible trip. I had tons of anxiety and I'm like, I'm never gonna do psychedelics again. Fast forward a couple of years, this is about 4 or 5 years ago. My brother comes back and he was living in Victoria at the time. He comes back and he's like, you know what? We're gonna try and give you a good experience. I wanted you to have this chance to have psychedelics and have a good experience.
Mm.
So he convinces me to do this. And we go on a hike. I somehow agree to this. We go on a hike and I have the most incredible life-changing experience with one tab of LSD with him.
Mm.
It was a deeply spiritual moment. I like really connected with myself, with my past, my future, and like what I'm doing with my life and everything. And it was such a pivotal life-changing moment that from that point on, I had a series of other LSD trips that were all incredibly powerful and really changed my perspective and thinking on things. And this kind of led me to the point of being like, man, this stuff is so cool. And it's doing so much for me in terms of changing my life, self-actualization, actualizing and all that. And I don't have a lot of friends that I can talk about with this on this kind of topic and share all this. And that was around the time when I was just like changing up my friends. I had a lot of friends that were like drinking a lot and doing a whole bunch of activities and things that were just not conducive to my lifestyle. So I was like really trying to change who I was and everything. And I was like, I want a chance to have an opportunity to meet new people, to connect with people who share this sort of experience. And it was my brother again who nudged me a little bit in that direction. He's like, he had a meetup that he was running in Victoria. And he was saying, well, why don't you start a meetup here? And that kind of got me thinking. I'm like, you know what? There actually is no meetup like that here. So I went and I looked, and you know what? I'm like, I'm going to do this. And I set up the whole psychedelic society, which just turned out to be a small thing that grew quite rapidly from there. You know, so that's sort of like what led me down all this. And again, alongside of all this, my background is working in the ER as a nurse. So again, there was also a lot of challenges with me becoming more open about my past experience or my experiences with psychedelics and everything. And again, yeah, so that's kind of my background. I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent of how this all pulled me in here, but like that is sort of what galvanized me to start this community and have it grow into what it's become.
So there we go.
Yeah.
So what kind of advice would you give people who kind of was in the same boat as you? You know, like they're pro psychedelics. They can't really find anybody in their friends group to talk with. How do they actually go about and, start a community group on their own, and how do they grow it?
Yeah, so I mean, I think really like if you're looking at starting a community or anything like this, I mean, the biggest thing is to actually go out there and do it. My process in this was that I want to just start something that other people can come together and join me for. And I never thought it would actually grow to anything more than a couple of people coming to meet up with us in a coffee shop, sitting down and having, a 2-hour conversation about psychedelics and things like that. A big process is just like having faith in taking that step forward and just sort of see what comes out of it. And then you can grow and adjust as you move forward. So again, it's like I had lots of doubts in starting this. Many times I was just like, well, I don't know, like who am I? I'm just some guy who likes psychedelics. Like, do I have any expertise to do this, right? And that's the thing. A lot of people have that kind of doubt. I'm sure whenever you start something, you're like, well, what do I know about this? But it's like trusting in the process of actually like taking that step forward, taking that leap, and then learning along the way, because you'll never actually be fully ready for anything at any point anyway. So it's a whole process. So what I would say is just, yeah, have that faith in taking that first step.
Yeah, I definitely think that's really great advice to apply to just like life in general. Like you'll never
Totally.
really feel all that ready. Just go and do it and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
So, as you know, I co-run the Vancouver Women's Psychedelics group here, and I've been getting this question just here and there, and I wonder how you would respond to this. A lot of people seem to think that when we have these events, we just like all come together and just like trip out together, which is not the case.
Yeah, no, no.
So how would you describe, or can you give examples of the type of events and whatnot that the society holds?
Yeah, no, for sure. So first off, it was just meetups, coffee shop talk, kind of simple stuff like that, friendships, community. But it's grown into a lot more. We actually have guest speakers. So we have more of a bit of a format to it. So we'll have a guest speaker who talks for like half hour, 45 minutes. They'll give a talk on a variety of like interesting topics. Then after we'll go into like breakout sessions. We'll have a chance for people to get together in smaller groups and everything. That's like the big step coming up. And then after often we'll have like some kind of food. We'll have like a BBQ or something. A lot of the events are outdoors whenever we could within the confines of the limits of restrictions in COVID. So it would turn into this big event where afterwards everyone would just congregate, have that real social experience, connect with people, meet friends, and just like have that sort of experience with everyone, right? And again, like that's been the central point of the meetup, but it's grown into a lot more than that. So there's a series of sort of events and things that we've done. We've done things like mushroom scavenging adventures. We've done a big group of us came together to do a psychedelic calendar, which we've actually produced and have like physical copies of. So that was been exciting. We've done movie screenings, beach hangouts, hikes, walks, retreats, camping, like film screenings, BBQs. There's just a whole bunch of events. And again, what's cool about it is that we've actually started to evolve more in the direction of like being a little bit more of a decentralized. So we kind of started to change the government structure so that we can actually have community members kind of step up and start their own like mini subgroup within the community, right? So there's people who do their own integration circle or things like that. So the group is evolving, the community is growing, and there's a lot more than just that once a month meetup that we have. Those are great, but like that's just like the gateway to everything else. And then once you join in, we have the big Discord channel. That's where everyone talks, and we have the community organizing going on over there. There's a lot of stuff that we do, and again, there's even more things we're planning. And I guess that's something we can talk about later. But it's definitely evolving into something, and there's a lot of things that are there as part of the community.
For sure. And knowing that in the past, 2 years, we had this global pandemic here, how has that affected the community growth or even just like events in general?
So that threw, let's just say, a wrench into everything. I mean, to the whole world as it was, but it definitely made things difficult for us because so COVID came around right around the period when we were starting to see the most exponential growth. I think the meetup that we had, the last physical space meetup we had before that, was one that we actually had to last minute switch coffee shops because there was just so many people coming that we actually couldn't even fit them into the coffee shop. Like it just wouldn't fit that many people. So we were lucky to find a place that was this massive, I mean, I can sort of call it a coffee shop. It's a lost and found cafe. It's a great place in downtown Vancouver, but they have a massive space there and they let us kind of take over the back half of the cafe. We set up like a whole auditorium. We had guest speakers and all that kind of stuff. And this was where we're like really learning and figuring out like what works. It was like this whole organic process of evolution. And COVID came around, and of course, at this point, all the restrictions came in, and we were kind of scratching our heads for a little bit, being like, well, what are we going to do? And we were just thinking, okay, well, this is just a couple week thing. Maybe we'll just do an online event. Everyone was getting big into Zoom at the time, and we're like, okay, well, let's give this a go. Let's see what comes of it. That actually went pretty well. A lot of people weren't working, or like there was a lot of people that you weren't seeing your friends in person, so people were quite energized to come and join Zoom meetings and stuff. So we actually gave back. We gave opportunity for some of our own community members to give some of their talks, right? So we don't just source guest speakers from the outside or from whatever connections we have. We also let people who are within our community to give talks and discussions. And so we were doing this for almost every 2 weeks for a little while. This came with its own challenges because now, one, you're dealing with all the tech issues. There was also a point that we got to the sort of Zoom fatigue, right?
Yes.
So that was another big challenge, is that it's good to be able to talk to people on the screen, but it's better to be able to talk to them in person, to feel that energy, right? To be able to like really look in their eyes, to see their face, to like have all that. So, one of the things we really worked on was, once it was permissible, that we acquired a permit and held our first outdoors event in Stanley Park. We had a special area at Prospect Point, which is just wonderful. They have like a covered area with benches and stuff. And, we were able to do it with masks, and we had a permit, and we had hand sanitizer and all that. And it was just wonderful. I mean, I just remember the people coming up, so many comments that resonated around the idea of like, thank you for creating the space so that people can actually get together and like have community. Because so many people were like, that was their first time coming out of their house, right? Like short of like going grocery shopping or anything. It's the first time actually like going out to any like social kind of event or anything. And that's the moment I really started to see, and a lot of us in the community were seeing that it's like the community is like what it's all about.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I didn't know you had to get the permit from the city to hold an event outside.
That's
Wow.
right. Yeah. So we had to fundraise for that as well. That came with, people are pretty good about making donations and stuff. So we were able to break even at least.
Yeah. Do people still have to get a permit now?
So right now we're looking at, now that they've put the restrictions back, we can actually do them in coffee shops and everything, but it was just for outdoors at that time. I don't know if that's the case anymore. But I'd have to check into that.
Yeah.
So
it sounds like a hoop to jump through for sure. Like we're just trying to, get people to meet in person.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
bond, and talk to
Yeah.
people. Okay. So 1,400 members, that is pretty huge. How do you deal with, I guess, like community management when like a member has an issue with another and they bring it up to you? Like, how do you manage all that? Does that happen
Yeah.
often?
Yeah, so like I'm the type of person that tends to not want to rely on other people or have other people rely on me. So that means that I want to do everything myself,
Mm.
right? Like I just take everything on myself. I'm like, no, I'll do it. And that's something that works for a while. Like certainly in a community like this, like when it's small, like that's very self-sufficient. You can run it that way. You can handle everything yourself, right? But as it grows, it gets a lot more challenging and the group dynamics change and everything. So one of the things that I that sort of emerged naturally. I mean, part of it was like Kenny, for example, like he was right there. He's our co-organizer, and he's basically been collaborating with me in helping run the meetup and everything. So part of it was just allowing people to sort of fill into their roles, right? There's people who are just like more actively engaged and are like giving more back, and then as they provide more and contribute more, they're more involved in the decision making and everything. So Kenny came in and really helped with that. The other thing too was just like delegating roles to people. So for
Mhm.
example, we'd have like community leaders. Those were the people that would say, for example, run when we need to be these breakout sessions. This is when we break out into groups of 6 or 8, something small like that after the guest speaker. We would have someone that would be sort of like a leader in there, as in like someone who can just maybe help facilitate the conversation a little bit, or just kind of warm people up a bit. And that was sort of based on a volunteer basis, and people were kind of like, they would be welcome into those roles if they wanted to. And part of that was just like allowing people to fill the needed roles that existed. And again, a lot of this was organic. It wasn't like we held an election to, elect someone into it. It was more like,
Yeah.
someone's putting in time, they're showing up for the events, they're contributing, they're there in the online conversations, and they really are like, they're putting their heart into the community, then they can take on more responsibility and like have more an active role in that and in the decision making process and things like that. That's part of the challenge is like, as you get bigger, you do need to start setting up certain systems and stuff like
Mhm.
that. And I think so. One of the other things too is, and I don't know if this is what you're asking, but in terms of like the community members, like their interaction with each other,
Mhm.
we've had a couple of instances where we've had conflict between community members. For the most part, it's great. They're
Mhm.
wonderful people. People really are there for each other and for the community. And people, they come from different backgrounds and all that, but they get along very well. However, given a group this size, it is really just a matter of numbers that at some point you're going to have people that, for whatever reason, maybe they're just going through a really hard time in their life. Maybe they're just like not in their best self at that moment. And that led to a couple of instances where we've had people that did make some other members feel unsafe, that caused some amount of harm to them, that was like enough of an issue that it was brought to our attention and we had to find a way to deal with that. Those are tricky because that led to us actually having to create and really like think through like what our code of conduct is
Mhm.
and make sure people sign up on that and everything, and just have a set of rules. Like a lot of the rules were implicit, but now they have to be explicit, right? So
Mhm.
that people have to like definitely sign on to it, and like then we have something that we can go by and we can point to and be like, hey, like you're gonna get a strike because this is not something that's appropriate. So in this case, I actually ended up having to spend. I called up everyone involved, and we had like a full heart-to-heart chat, and just to really get the idea of like what happened and all that, and be able to sort of mediate that whole situation. So these things are tricky, and again, this is like, it's bound to happen, but it's not like we were necessarily planning for it. And maybe that was a
Mhm.
little bit of oversight on my part. It's just thinking, well, it's just like one big happy family, we get
Yeah.
along very well. But sometimes things do come up, and
Mhm.
part of that is like you find out creative ways to be able to resolve these problems
Yeah.
as they do come up. So
Yeah, 100%. And I'm
yeah.
sure it's very like case by case basis as well, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then, there was a couple other smaller, not so significant things, but we've been able to deal with it in the context specific way that it came up.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Speaking of like, expansion and growth and whatnot, what is the future of the society?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a good question. A lot of it is when this started, there wasn't so much of a vision as like, it's like just this place to come together. But after a while, like it was kind of like, well, where are we going? Like, where are we going as a community? And like, what do we want to be? And we actually created a roundtable, like a leadership roundtable, which was just a number of members who came together to kind of help offer input into their experiences of what the the whole community has been like, how things have been going, what's good, what's not working. This is something we plan to hold sort of on a quarterly basis so that we can kind of continue to reorient, where we're going. The number one pillar of the society that we've come to see it as is that it is about a place that's for the community, right? That's about creating a community, networks, having supportive people there for each other, and learning about psychedelics and personal experiences on that. A lot of the decisions of like what we do going forward are based on like that idea of like, is this going to foster an improved community experience for us? So to give you an example, for example, like we're looking at within the umbrella of a music festival, a big group of us going together for a music festival experience, right? So that's a place where it's a little bit safer in the context of like, if some people are in a trip, they can trip, but they're like under there's that umbrella of protection around a community of, in a music festival, for example, like Shambhala or Base Coast or something like that. So we're looking at trying to have more group community experiences and just offer more of these things for people who want to come and join. So that's kind of like one of the things that we're looking at. A big aspect of, again, is just like having more physical space kind of meetups and things like that. So part of that's just the evolution of the growth, and you're going to see sort of where that takes it. But that's a big aspect of it. Another aspect of the community, again, is like the education, and this is more with regards to like, we've had things like workshops, like a mushroom growing workshops. Those are like really fun. People really love that. We're planning a cacao ceremony workshop coming up this summer as well. So there's a couple of things kind of coming up, and just a number of different speakers and seminars and things like that. So those are the kind of the main things that help guide our vision in terms of where we're going forward from here.
The mushroom growing one definitely sounds a lot of fun.
Yeah, I know it really resonated with people, and actually that was my first time growing my own mushrooms, and there was some kind of, I'll just say this as an aside, but there is something special about tripping on the mushrooms that you yourself put your love and energy into cultivating, right? There's a special like connection with that, and maybe it's just a placebo thing, but it does slightly colorize the trip, I would say. But it totally could be just me. But that was a really, really wonderful experience to have that workshop.
I would say the analogy that pops up in my mind is like going out to eat versus having homemade food.
Yeah, no, totally. There's something about like just that love and effort that you put into it, and then like really being able to cherish that at the end, to really bask in that. It's quite amazing. So definitely agree.
Yeah. Were there other societies or other organizations and groups up there that you looked up to and was modeling after?
There was one meetup. I actually haven't gone to too many meetups. That's the thing is there was one meetup I went to. I remember there was that I showed up for a couple of their events. There's a Jordan Peterson meetup, and they were the ones that were having a similar process. I went to a couple of their meetups, and I just sort of learned how they handled it in terms of what was going on, because they had this thing where at one point their meetup got so big, they had to deal with the same challenges sort of that we did. So I was able to sort of see how they resolved that, to take some guidance from that. And also that's where I got the idea of like going to bigger coffee shops, like just finding good locations and everything. And there's been a couple other meetups I've gone to. They were more like effective altruism kind of stuff, and I've learned some pretty cool things there as well. There was this Sam Harris meetup I went to as well. They're like engaging. They often have like really interesting philosophical concepts and stuff, and I often do enjoy that.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know. What would you say to the people listening about, because not everybody will be here in our favorite city, but what can they expect, or where can they go and find their local society?
Meetup is the best place to find. In terms of resources, if you're looking at resources to learn more about psychedelics, one resource I really like is like Airwood Vault. They have a lot of great stuff about trip reports and everything. I mean, it's maybe more like an online community, so you can join in and talk with people, share your experiences and the things you're trying. There's so many cool stuff that you can learn there.
Yeah. What was it called?
It's Airwood Vault.
Oh, I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. They have
How do
it's
you
just
spell
like
it?
this. I think it's ERROWID. Don't quote me on that, but something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So they have really cool like lots of trip reports and stuff, and you can just like learn so much about it, right? And you can, as someone who's made mistakes in terms of like stacking or certain combinations, right? I've done a lot of psychedelics for both the context of like healing and the self-actualization aspect, but also for valence and like just to experience the joys of life, right? And when I've done that, I've made mistakes before in terms of like certain combinations. And it really pays to maybe go and look up what you're planning on doing and see what other people's, responses are to that. And then that way you can sort of be more safe when you explore or when you trip or do anything like that. So again, that's a great resource for just learning. And there's a real community aspect to it as well. But it's definitely worth checking out.
Okay. A personal question. So being a nurse in the ER, which is very, scientific, very clinical, you got to go to school and learn about all the sciencey type things, right? Versus psychedelics. Was there any kind of conflict or challenges for you personally, internally?
Yeah, so that's a really good question because there's a huge kind of conflict there if you think of it. I was in a place where starting this community at first, like, so this was 2019. So it was, again, like, I'm not saying there isn't taboo and edginess around it, but it was definitely a little bit more edgy at that time. And
Mhm.
I did feel that kind of risk, like, well, what about my job, right? Like I'm talking about, illegal psychoactive medications, and a lot of which also has like still a fair bit of taboo around that topic. So what is that like? And one of my goals at that time was to be able to fully come out of the psychedelic closet and be totally open about my embrace of psychedelics. And I chose I chose a scientific method to do that. And what I did by that was I published an article that was published in Canadian Nurse magazine, which is like the largest, longest running nursing magazine for nurse practitioners, LPNs, RNs. And published an article called I can't even remember the right name. It's called Magic Mushrooms and the Future of Psychiatry, or the Future of Mental Health. This was a year and a half ago or so. The idea of this was that it introduces all the science that's going on with magic mushrooms, for example. I specifically focused on magic mushrooms, so I talked about ketamine and a few others, but the specific way that this is being done in research right now and where the trials are at and how it's helping change patients' lives and, dealing with all these psychiatric conditions like treatment-resistant depression and all that. Once this was published, essentially I just shared this everywhere, right? So there's this big Facebook nursing group. I shared it there. I'm like, I'm just gonna go all out. Like I'm gonna share this, and this is gonna be sort of my inaugural, like, stepping out of the closet kind of thing, and being like, hey, yeah, like this is cool. And I piggybacked off of the scientific method because I'm like, I'm gonna show people that science is really demonstrating the effects of it. It's not just this like hippie thing that people take and like they trip and then they come back with all these weird stories and they're whatever they're they go off to be a monk or something, right? Like that's not, maybe that happens, but that's not what it's all about, right? Like
Mhm.
people have some serious conditions that are being treated by this, and this is like revolutionizing what actual tools we have to deal with this right now. And so when I published this, something really incredible happened. And this is something I wasn't expecting. I thought, maybe we'll get some positive feedback, some negative or whatever, but I didn't think it was going to be too big. So I'm like, well, it was well written. It made really good points. And we're pretty progressive society here, especially in the West here, right? So like people are really fairly accepting of it. I didn't think it was going to be like the hardest thing. But something interesting happened is like when I was in work, I got a lot of feedback from this. Like again, it was shared in the nursing groups, and the conversations, for example, like even in the break room, was all about psychedelics. So there's a number of individuals who were like, we had opened the door to be able to talk about your own personal psychedelic experiences in the nursing break room, for example, right? And this is like something I never actually imagined. And I thought that was really cool to be able to be in this place. And like I had other, nurses, for example, come up to me, and certain nurses in leadership and things like that, for example, like be able to like have conversations with me about psychedelics. I mean, a number of times, including some of the physicians there as well. So like it opened the door to that conversation. And it also like introduced a lot of nurses to it because there's others that were like, that's so cool. Like I've heard about this. Oh, like my nephew was talking about this, about magic mushrooms, but like I didn't know that it does all this. Or like that's so cool. Like a lot of people, like when you're so enmeshed in a community like this, you almost forget how little exposure other people even today might have, right?
Yes.
And that was when I was learning. I'm like, wow, a lot of them, like, it's okay, they're appreciating, but they actually didn't really know that much about it, or they had these maybe biases or stereotypes of what it was, and maybe this helped dispel some of that and help them see what it is about. And so that was that was my, to answer your question, that was my way of like, I wanted to be open about that. And that was my way of like introducing that in a way that it wouldn't, let's just say it was the safest way I could come out about it. Right. And I'm like, but I do want to be out about it and be open about it and be able to talk about that. So,
And no backlash at all?
no, not at all. In fact, there's a huge outpouring of support. I had um, oh, it must have been dozens of messages in the first week, and then even thereafter, like people still messaged me about the article and stuff, and asking questions, or like other nurses being like, some of them about their sharing their own stories of depression and their struggles and how it's changed them, and thank you for sharing this or whatever, things like that. And I thought that was just really amazing to hear that sort of support and be able to connect with other people who have gone through similar journeys and things like that. So especially healthcare professionals, because
Mhm.
we are the ones that ultimately are talking to the patient at
Yeah.
the end of the day. And sometimes patients have questions, right? Like when we introduced medical assistance in dying, that was another thing where it's like all of a sudden now patients are asking questions to nurses, and you would be well served to have some background of knowledge on how to answer those questions.
I really resonate with what you said about, being in the psychedelic industry. Sometimes I forget how the general public still doesn't know that much about it, or that it still has that kind of older connotation as like, oh, it's a street drug, or like, this is what
Yeah,
you do when you go to parties. And it's like, well, no, you can do it in a very intentional and therapeutic setting, which helps you heal from all your shit from the
yeah.
past. Like it's a really good tool to have in your arsenal for sure.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And definitely just to be able to share that message so that people
Mhm.
can understand what it's really about.
Yeah. On that note, what advice do you have for people, or like to your younger self who is just starting to explore intentional psychedelic use?
Look, I mean, it goes back to the set and setting kind of stuff, but a big aspect of this really is being with someone. Like that's probably one of the and especially if it's someone sober and who's done it before. Like that's so important because like even me, like I've made mistakes even when I know better, right? Where I've been alone, or just not even mentioning that I'm gonna, like, for example, like I'm really big into trail running. So if I take like half a tab of LSD or a tab of LSD, there's just such a mind body connection. You get into this incredible flow state, and I would go for like 4 or 5 hour runs and things like that. And sometimes I'd be like out of reception. And I hadn't told anyone that I was going on a run or where I was going. And, you know, I'm the type of person that, I can go for a couple hour run. And I usually don't even take water because 2.5 hours or something works fine. Unless if it's a hot day, of course, and I'll take my Camelback and everything. But usually a 2 hour run. When you're in LSD, like you lose track of time. You
Yeah.
you like totally forget. And I made that mistake, and I was just I went for more than twice as long as I should have. And I actually had to walk it back because I'm like, this is dangerous. It was like really big risk. And so that's what I mean is like, so if you do it with someone, you are able to be there to check each other to make sure you at least, know what you're doing, because everyone has their blinders, right? And you can get experience in something, the rules and you break them, right? And you do stupid things and you look back on it and like that could have been way worse, right?
Yeah.
So again, it's just like having someone like, making sure the dose is right. I would say start low, work your way up. The emotional state you're in is huge, right?
Mhm.
And people underestimate that, right? But even with things like alcohol, like if you're in a bad state and you drink, that anger is going to come out, right? Whatever you've got there is just going to come to the surface and it's going to be
Mhm.
amplified.
Yeah.
And the same is maybe to a higher degree with psychedelics. So it's just like say no. If you're not in that state, don't do it. Like if you're not ready, don't do it. You can do it another day. You can always plan again, right? Like
Mhm.
that safety aspect is huge because like you might end up in a situation where like I was, where I had a really bad experience and I vowed to not take psychedelics again. Imagine like all of the gifts and all the insight and all the things that I could have gotten that I would now have denied myself to be able to have. That's why like one bad trip can just take away everything else you're going to experience with it. So try and do what you can to mitigate that. And again, having someone there to guide you through it, especially someone sober and a
Mhm.
friend, someone you trust, and someone who's been there, that's great. I think that's like highly recommended.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think setting, intention, dosage, these four things are like super, super important. And
Yeah.
I actually have a lot of friends coming to me nowadays when, I came out of the psychedelic closet. I
Yeah.
like that, by the way. I'm going to start using that term
Yeah.
now. And when I
Yeah.
came out of the closet, and now that they know, they're all coming to me and asking about, oh, how do I do this? I'm scared. I'm scared. I'm like, really, there's nothing to be scared of. Like, just start with a microdose. It's like
Yeah.
1/10 to 1/20th of a therapeutic dose, and you're not going to really feel anything. Yeah, and then go
Yeah.
from there. Like just bump up when you feel like you're safe enough to do that.
Yeah. I think totally baby steps. So that's probably the best way
Mhm.
to go, especially if you're like quite tepid about that.
What do you think is a pattern that we're seeing right now happening in the psychedelic space? And are you for or against it?
Well, one observation I've noticed is the increase in stacking. So that is, and maybe this is some of the more psychonauts I know, the people that are like more, you know, well versed in their understanding of psychedelics and their experiences and everything, but doing certain combinations. I have two angles on it because from one degree, like the certain combinations, like if you're taking LSD and smoking weed, or if you're taking LSD and ketamine, or if you're, you know, there's a whole bunch of different things that you can mix in, and it can really enhance the experience. It can take you so much deeper.
Mm.
It can just it can literally feel like taking another psychedelic on top of that, as if like you're sober compared to your baseline, right? Like it's just like an entirely different dimension. So, especially if you're doing like deep work, or if you're just trying to even experience, certain, the experience of life in a certain way, the certain pleasures or whatever it be. So stacking is a powerful tool, but again, with this power comes the fact that it's, it carries with a lot of danger and a lot of risk. That is one of those things where like people can have destabilizing experiences. Like I'm very evangelist about psychedelics, but at the same time, it's like there are people who've had trips that have sometimes years worth of trauma from a bad experience, right? And it's like important to remember that like there are risks and you have to be careful with how you approach these, and especially like the dose you're taking or how you're combining things. And so that's why with combinations, I feel that, stacking, that it's like you have to tread lightly with that.
Mm.
Really be especially mindful of the state you're in, the dose you're taking, what you're combining, really knowing if those are combinations you can do and work with, having
Mm.
someone there for you for that, and making sure you have some of that experience and to be able to deal with challenging experiences like that. I'm not going to say that stacking is a huge thing. I've observed it, to some degree with people around me, and a lot of festival goers will, for example, do that as well. So there is that aspect, but it's just like, it does carry risk, and like just be aware of that, right?
Mhm. Stacking is not one that I've too familiar with. I think I've only known like the very common ones that people do, right? Like a happy flip or a hippie flip or something like that.
Yeah,
But otherwise, I would say I usually don't stack.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
usually don't stack.
And I would say, it's like I'm not at all opening the door for people to do that, right? It's just like there are people who want to go further,
Mm.
and they will find that there are certain combinations that work. But it's just like, you know what? Sometimes just mushrooms or LSD by itself is great, and that's all you
Yeah.
need. You don't need to like keep pushing, because ultimately you are like everyone's got, there is that line, there's that boundary, and you don't actually know where it is, and you're going to cross it at some point.
Mm.
And it could be devastating. It could be mild or moderate, and you'd be like, I'll never touch that again.
Mhm.
But the more you combine, the bigger the risk. Just be very cautious about that. That's what I would say.
Mhm. Mhm. What do you think the psychedelic landscape would look like 10 years from now,
Yeah.
2032?
On ambitious side, I would say that if we're in a place where, so much in the same way that Western society certainly has a cultural context or scaffolding for dealing with alcohol. If you see someone who's like walking down the street and they're super drunk, or if your friend's throwing up in the bathroom, like you have an idea of like what to do. You're gonna get them some towels, you get some water, get them a bucket. Like you know what's going on. You're not gonna like see someone throwing up and immediately call 911, right? Like you're gonna know what to do. You're gonna be in a steady state and know how to respond to that. So I think if we get to that point in 10 years where there's maybe a little bit more normalization to psychedelics. So it's still just as powerful as it is. But like people have a cultural understanding of what is going on with psychedelics, with people who are in that experience, and how to deal with them, how to respond to them. That does a big thing for the person who's tripping as well, because now they don't have to worry about the exterior self-image that's going on. Like the people can be very self-aware as well when they're having a bad trip or whatever. And then it's like, what am I going to do in this outside world that might harm myself, or totally destroy my reputation or something like that, right? So being in a place where it's like people can, if you see a stranger who looks like they're tripping or whatever, like you don't panic. You know what to do. Maybe to go to
Mm.
help them, or like at least just have an understanding of what's going on. If we can get to a place like that, I think that's definitely possible as like more people have that experience.
Mm.
um and it's like more culturally accepted, and it's just generally like less taboo. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's one of the things I think, is definitely a possibility for where we could be in the next decade.
For sure. So more of a common
Definitely. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Amazing. So what are you working on right now and what's next for you in your journey? And then how can our listeners support you?
There's a couple of things that I'm focusing on. And one, as always, is the Psychedelic Society. If people are interested in checking it out, I mean, it's just such a lovely community. I would totally recommend people to just come by and check it out at some point. There's lots of little events and stuff that we're doing as well. That, again, through either our website at vancouverpsychedelicsociety.ca, or if you search Vancouver Psychedelic Society on meetup.com, well, the first one that pops up, you can just join in there and just see when our next events are. We've got one coming up on March 13th, sorry. That's definitely welcome for anyone to come. So, that's one of my big focuses, is that's always what I'm working towards. I'm also, again, I'm doing my master's right now, to be a psychotherapist. So that's, another thing. It takes up time and it's focus, but I really enjoy it. This is the three big pillars. The third one would be my photography. So I'm doing professional photography, and I do that on the side and work with some clients and things like that. And that's it's another big passion of mine. I've done photography for a little bit over 14 years now. So
Oh
I'm
wow.
just kind of keeping that going. So those are the big three things that are like big in my life right now, that draws enough energy from me. And I think just finding a good balance between them is what it's all about. So
Okay.
but definitely come out and check out the Vancouver Psychedelic Society. We've got just so many amazing people there, wonderful guest speakers, and just like it's an incredible time. Like you come out, you leave one of those events, you feel elated. Like you feel like you've had real community, you've had real experiences, you've had real social connections, and you just come down to one event, check it out, and that's it. And you'll like it.
Yeah, I've been to a few, and I
Yeah.
would say that that's definitely true. You definitely find, like-minded people that you can talk about psychedelics with, and not feel like you're being judged for doing things that are quote unquote taboo.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Totally. Totally.
amazing, cool.
Yeah.
So heading into lightning round now,
All
where
right.
it's rapid fire style, and I'll ask you a question, and you can answer in one word or one phrase.
All right.
Okay, ready?
Let's go.
What's your favorite medicine and why?
Oh, definitely LSD. It's just far superior to mushrooms. I think it's just you're more in control, and it enhances your world a little bit more,
Hmm.
and it's more energizing. I love running with it. It's incredible.
I'll have to try that. I've never never ran on
It's
LSD
yeah,
before.
it's the most amazing thing. You have like boundless energy, and
Mm,
you're in a like endless flow state. It's one of the
mm,
most pleasurable experiences I've ever had.
interesting. Okay, who do you follow or who inspires you in the psychedelic space?
I really like a lot of Terrence McKenna's thinking and
Mm,
his ideas. I watch a lot of his videos and stuff, and that it's a really good message that comes out.
mm. What's the latest lesson that you learned in life?
I think to slow down and not to try to find extrinsic solutions for intrinsic problems. So
Mm,
in part, like not trying to spiritually bypass, for example,
mm.
right? Sometimes you got to climb the mountain yourself,
Yeah,
and you don't need the helicopter ride up.
yeah.
It's about the journey sometimes.
The analogy that I always hear with that is like you got to do your own push-ups.
You
You can
do have
hire
to
the
do it.
trainer,
Yep,
but you got to do your own push-ups.
exactly. No, that's totally it.
Amazing. Do you have a favorite quote?
So this one is from Epictetus, and I really resonate with this one. So this is I cannot escape death, but at least then I can escape the fear of it.
Mm,
And I've had in my recent past a near death experience, and so I really resonate with this, and that had a big impact on me, let's say.
mhm, mhm. And that I think really ties well with psychedelics as well. With like
Totally.
the the
Yeah.
near death and death doulas and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, there is something said about being able to die before you die, right? So
Mm,
that allows you to be, in a sense, like free of your shackles, or like all the chains and everything that hold you back,
yeah.
because you've already lost it once, and then now you
Mm,
can really like live a new life. It's like a bit of a rebirth, if you will.
yeah,
And
for sure.
psychedelics can definitely bring that in a sense.
Yeah. Have you experienced ego dissolution before?
Definitely have.
Yeah.
Yes. A handful of times with psychedelics, and
Yeah.
I'm actually doing 5-MeO DMT tonight, so
Oh.
we'll see if there's one more to add to that. I've never done it before, so it's gonna be
Okay.
yeah, it's gonna be something.
Yeah. How has experiencing ego death shifted you?
It's changed my connection with what matters in my life,
Mm,
right? There's a lot of things that I was letting creep into my life in terms of both relationships, but also like time spent on things that was like meaningless and worthless.
Mm.
And really being able to sort of connect with myself, like seeing myself to the future self, like that connection, that bridge between who I am right now and who I'm going to be, was essentially like that bridge was created so that I can sort of see that. And I'm in touch with like all the things that I do right now and how that affects me and how it will affect me in the future. So it is a profound shift in thinking and in mindset.
Definitely. I think it helps you shed a lot, especially when you are encountering a shamanic death. That's what it is, right?
Yeah.
It makes you zoom in on the things that are actually important in life. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Give me 3 resources that you reference regularly in regards to psychedelics.
So again, Arrowhead is one of them. Arrowhead I really enjoy. There's a book called, actually I've got it right here. So this one's pretty cool. If I'm pronouncing it right, it's Fikal. This is the one by Alexander and Anne Shulgin. And it's the chemical love story. So they actually talk about, it's about, there's so many different psychedelics other than just the common, like, everyone knows about ayahuasca and LSD and mushrooms and ibogaine and whatever, but there's so many more designer chemicals and different types of psychedelic compounds that exist. And here they actually went and tried them on themselves, and they're like a bunch of trip reports and everything of like things that are like you've never, like experiences that are just totally unlike any of the conventional psychedelics or the classical psychedelics can give us. So that's a pretty cool resource. I've kind of started reading into it a little bit, and there's some pretty cool stuff in there. So
can I see the cover?
Yeah, you can. Yeah. So this is I got this right here. I don't know if you can see that there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So there's another one as well. So
There's got like 2 volumes or something.
Yeah, there's 2 volumes. That's right. Yeah. So
okay. Cool.
It's pretty dense, but there's great stuff in there.
It looks quite thick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question here before we wrap up. What would you want the world to know?
I think that you matter, that you're here for a reason, and that there is a purpose to your life, And sometimes it's that we maybe get disconnected from it or we get lost, but it is there, and it is something you can find, And everyone has that, like everyone can find that meaning, Sometimes it's hard, but that there is an ultimate reason that you're here for, And that's been a driving belief for me, and I feel that it's very inspiring, and it helps bring an answer to that existential question, right? Finding your place in the world.
100%. Yeah. That's a really good reminder for people who need to be hearing that.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Kristof, for your time. What a gift to be chatting with you.
It's been wonderful. I really appreciate you having me on here and being able to just share about myself and the Psychedelic Society and all the stuff that we've gone through, and I'm just so thrilled to be part of this, and thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for continuing to be the aspiring leader out there for all the aspiring liberal leaders out there, and we'll catch you next time.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the Liberated Leader podcast. If you found value in today's episode, then please, 1, leave us a positive review, share it with a friend. 2, join our tribe on social. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Until next time, to your liberation and beyond.